We are just 2 days away from the Jets' Week 1 matchup against the San Francisco 49ers, and former general manager Michael Lombardi did report that the Hassan Reddick holdout might be coming to an end soon. However, Reddick's agent denied the report, calling it false and misleading. Reddick will most likely be inactive for the Jets' Week 1 matchup. That said, who will step up for the Jets in the pass rush? Who will be the X factor? Who better to bring on to talk all things New York Jets than Joe Blewett of Jets X Factor? Let's roll.
Jets, Jets, let's go.
Jets wide receiver Wesley Walker. Wesley, how you doing today? ESPN writer Mr. Rich Cimini, Jets reporter for The Athletic, Mr. Zach Rosenblatt, Hall of Famer and Jets legend, Mr. Marty Lyons.
Your host, Connor Law.
Welcome in, everyone. We are here for a Saturday edition of NY Flight Jets Talk. And Hassan Reddick, still not in the Jets building. Michael Lombardi provided a glimmer of hope, saying he thinks this Reddick holdout's going to come to an end soon. However, Reddick's agent, Tori Dandy of CAA Sports, unfortunately did deny the report. Who is going to step up in the Jets pass game? That is the major question Jet fans are trying to solve. But let's bring in our guest for today's show, Joe Blewett of Jets X Factor. Joe, how you doing?
I'm doing well, man. I'm always impressed by you, Connor. The whole intro, the little kind of like preview to the show, the intro after it, very professional. I'm glad we kind of like inked you to a Quincy Williams type contract. We got you when you're a little bit cheap, and now you're blowing up news stories, all of this stuff. But we got you with Jets X Factor, so I'm happy we got you on a cheap contract.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm so happy to be at Jet X Factor. And before we get into it, Newsday, Jamie Stewart of Newsday did do a story on me today in which he tweeted it out, and you were a little surprised by my Tony Adams jersey, which I'm still wearing. What are your thoughts on Tony Adams and the jersey?
Yeah, no, I love the jersey. It's very like obscure. Like you're not going to see. I think if you go to a Jets game, I don't know if you do, you're probably going to be one in maybe two, maybe there's two people out of 100,000 who'd have it, minus his family. So I think it's a nice little purchase, and I think he's a guy who could be like that underrated kind of X factor type of guy for the Jets this year. Talking about his first year, only played in 2-3 games. Last year had his ups and downs, but not everybody's kind of path is linear, or the same linear path, and he might take 3, 4, 5 years to develop. Look at guys like Quincy Williams, took him a little bit. So I think Tony Adams could have a big role this year, and it might look like a great purchase after the season.
Yeah, he was an undrafted free agent, homegrown talent. That's what I like most about him. And staying with the topic of Tony Adams, I'm really high on him. I think there's a real shot that he leads the Jets in interceptions this season. Jets are facing off against George Kittle, tight end on the 49ers. He's obviously among the league's premier tight ends there. The Jets have always had a hard time covering tight ends over the years. We've seen scenarios. We saw at week 17 of last season, the Jets had to put Sauce Gardner on David Njoku. It got that out of hand. Who do you think will be covering Kittle to start the game? Do you think it's, maybe we see something Quincy Williams is on? Quincy Williams would most likely, CJ, he'd be on Christian McCaffrey in the backfield. Do you think Tony Adams is going to be the one locking down George Kittle?
Yeah. You'd assume it's more so Tony Adams. There's going to be some looks where hopefully it could be a Quincy Williams. We saw what happens when CJ Mosley's in coverage against linebackers, and obviously that was Njoku. So I don't want to I don't want to make any like large statements about CJ Mosley's pass coverage because of one game. But yeah, you'd hope it's going to be a Tony Adams. Obviously, he's more so the strong safety. I think he played 56% of the reps or something like that last year at strong safety. So a lot of people just say he's a high safety, but he's not. When you get into those quarter looks or even those man looks, that strong safety is going to be against that tight end, and that's probably the biggest upside to Tony Adams' game is he's a coverage guy. He played. You have reps of him last year. I think there was reps of him in man coverage against guys like Stephon Diggs. I'm not saying he did like a great job at it, but that's his highest upside is in man coverage. So putting him in against Kittle, it's probably our best matchup. Sans Sauce, you hope is going to be sometimes on Ayuk. We'll see exactly how that plays out. I don't think I think Jets fans probably expect Sauce Gardner to travel more than he actually is. I think he will more than he did last year, but I don't think it's going to be a thing where, okay, he's just locked on Ayuk the entire game. But trying to get Tony Adams on Kittle is probably their best path to success And he's a guy who people kind of overlook at this point for whatever reason. It's probably just because the Niners have a ton of guys in their offense who are worth noting. But Kittle's one of those guys who he could ruin the game for us. So you got to give him some attention for sure.
Chuck Clark tore his ACL in training camp last year. We didn't get to see him take a snap, a regular season, preseason, anything. He said he's playing with a chip on his shoulder. What do you think his role could possibly look like to start the season? I know he's in line to be one of the Jets starting safety, but how could he contribute in week 1?
Yeah, well, the biggest thing about Chuck Clark is, and kind of looking at last year, it's like Jordan Whitehead missed so many tackles, and so did Tony Adams. That's one thing that they have to clean up. And specifically, this game against the Niners, it's a game where, they are an East-West team. Obviously, they're a big yak team. Debo, McCaffrey, even Kittle's a good yak guy. So the Jets tackling is going to be tested in the first game. And typically teams do struggle tackling in the beginning of the year because you don't tackle a ton in training camp. Now, we do know that Saleh went extra hard in training camp and all that stuff. So does that pay off for the Jets where they're going to be able to tackle a little bit? And that's the biggest thing that Clark offers. My thing with Clark is he was more so a box safety with the Ravens, but I think with the Jets, he will play more high than in the box just because of Tony Adams' role. Again, trying to get him at strong safety and playing, in man coverage. So I do think he's a little bit miscast in the Jets system playing high. But still, it's not like it's a downgrade to go from Jordan Whitehead deep to Chuck Clark deep. Realistically, a lot of Jordan Whitehead's picks, he had those 3 picks in week 1. 2 of them were just punts by Josh Allen, and one was a really nice play. But with Clark, he'll be in the same role that Whitehead was, but I think he's much more clean in terms of tackling. So you're not going to see as much yak against this Jets team that you did in the prior years. So he will play high, but the biggest difference is he's actually going to make his tackles.
Yeah, I like what you said there about Chuck Clark. So from what I remember with this time with the Ravens, he was great in the box. He's known to deliver those big hits and stop the run. That's what Chuck Clark is known for throughout his NFL career. And Jordan Whitehead with all those missed tackles, you got to hope he could be a significant upgrade from Jordan Whitehead. The thing I don't like about the situation, I will say though, is hasn't played in over a year. ACL tear. We don't know what that's going to look like. Do you think fans should be concerned about that injury as we approach week 1 here?
Yeah. I don't know about concern, but it's a question mark, right? Like you don't know how a guy's going to return, and everybody returns differently. Again, there's some guys who come back from ACLs, Achilles, and all these injuries, and they look great. Look at Breece Hall last year, minus the conditioning in week 1. He was one of the best running backs in the NFL last year with an injury. But then there's guys where it takes a year or two to really bounce back. So we don't really know exactly what's going to happen now. The thing I will say with Clark is he's not a player who kind of like makes his hay on being a superior athlete or anything like that. Clark is more of like in a Mosley role where he's a guy who puts himself in the right spot because of his mind. He's really technically sound. So I don't think he's a guy who needs some level of high explosion to be a successful player. Like almost like Quincy. And Quincy's different now because I think his mental awareness and his smarts have definitely developed. But when he was with the Jets the first couple of years, he was making more plays because of his athleticism instead of his smarts, where Clark is kind of the opposite. He's not a superior athlete, but he's in the right spot at the right time because he knows how to read an offense. He knows the defense. He's a very smart veteran player. So I'm not overly concerned with him being not as explosive as he was in the past or anything like that.
Everyone smash that like button. Make sure you are subscribed. We are joined by Joe Blewett of Jet X Factor. And before we keep it going here, Joe, I have to pull up a comment from Boy Green here on the screen. Hey Joe, I'll ask the question on everyone's mind watching. How many 13-year-old Connors could you bench press?
I don't know how much Connor weighs, but I'm gonna go with at least probably 3 Connors. I'm gonna go with at least 3 Connors. So I appreciate that, Paul. Thank you, man.
How much do you bench?
It kind of depends. I go to the gym after my work schedule, which is at 12:30 at night. So I'm in there alone, so I can't max out because I don't want to get stuck on a bar. But it's 200 plus. I'm not trying to be one of those guys who's going to gloat and stuff like that. But yeah, I'll put a few reps up of you, Connor.
Wow, we gotta make some edit of Joe into some big muscled guy. I didn't know you were like that, Joe. I didn't know you were had that gym like physique. I know you're a strong guy, so you're a police officer, so you need to be a strong guy. But
exactly.
I didn't know you were one of those crazy gym rats. If
you said it, Connor. My job kind of demands me to, or at least I think it's smart to be fit when you do what I do. So yeah.
Absolutely. I'm going to move over to Hassan Reddick, and that's kind of the main headline, really all offseason, all training camp, and still
Mhm.
isn't here. Who do you think is going to be that player who steps up to replace Reddick to start the season?
Yeah, so that's the biggest concern, right? And I said it on Twitter, and people were kind of like, "Oh, like the Niners line isn't as it's not that much of an upgrade from the Panthers or the Giants." Because I basically said like I think JJ said something to the effect of like, "Hey, we don't need Reddick." This is not verbatim, but he said something to the effect of, "Hey, we don't need Reddick like X the Giants and the Panthers and everybody else who we played in joint practices. How our defensive line rush was." And I put out there like, "Hey, the Niners are a little bit of a different ball game than the Panthers and the Giants." And I didn't mean it like talent wise. I know they're left guard through right tackle. We have some, we have rookies, we have guys who are not performing very well on the Niners. It's more so the fact of Kyle Shanahan, like he knows our weaknesses, right? He's one of the best coaches in the NFL. He's going to we know we're weak against gap runs. He's going to know that they're going to deploy more gap runs most likely against us. And then when you have a guy like Trent Williams, and even if he's 80% of what he usually is, like that's still a very good left tackle. So you typically see JJ line up on that side. So you're probably going to see JJ against Trent Williams, which I'm not trying to talk crap about JJ here, but I think Trent Williams is a better tackle than JJ is at the end at this point. You're talking about literally a Hall of Fame left tackle who's still performing like the best tackle in the NFL at this point at 37 years old. So most likely JJ is going to be erased, right? Minus maybe some chase downs and things like that. He's not going to be beating Trent Williams. I don't think I'm going on a limb there or anything. And then past that, I think you kind of you slide the line away from him. So you're going to have a situation where it's the left tackle Trent Williams versus JJ. And then you slide the entire line towards Quinnen Williams. And then it's a thing where Quinnen Williams is seeing multiple hands on him. And then then it's a situation where you're going to have to depend on McDonald, McKinley, Watts, McGregor to win that one-on-one matchup. So it is a slight concern. And that's not even talking about, hey, they can slide, they could slide that line. They can also have an extra tight end or two, and they can chip that D end. And we know the 49ers are a team who will run a lot of 12, a lot of 22, a lot of heavier personnel sets. So you're really going to put a lot of emphasis on that opposite end of JJ to win as a pass rusher, and not only just win, but win quick, because the Niners get the ball out relatively quick. Again, a lot of yak in their offense. So the Jets pass rush is a huge question. There could be a situation where, hey, they figured out Quinnen Williams is one of the better D tackles in the league. He dominates. He gets pressures and sacks and all that stuff. There's also a situation where Kyle Shanahan schemes it right, gets rid of the ball quickly, double teams queuing, and maybe get the chip on that D end on the other side of JJ. And the Jets are looking at only a couple of pressures and maybe a sack, maybe no sacks. It's possible. So whoever that may be, I think it's probably going to be a combination of McDonald, unfortunately, Clemens, I don't think he offers a lot as a pass rusher, and then McKinley. Can those guys win? That's a huge X factor to this game.
I noticed you didn't mention Braden McGregor there. Is that just based on how he doesn't have NFL experience in the past? You seem to be going. I wouldn't consider McDonald and Clemens veterans, but McKinley obviously has more of a veteran presence there.
Yeah, it wasn't like me. It was more so just me forgetting him and just kind of naming names. I would say it's McDonald because he's the first, he's the first round pick. He's expected to do this stuff, right? Like he had that year to develop. And then past that, I think McKinley out of those guys in the preseason were the guys who were the most impressive, right? So I think he's the next guy up. He not only did he show something as a pass rusher, but he also showed stuff as a run defender, as well. And in terms of pass rush, I was talking specifically about pass rush. I saw more again from McKinley than a guy like a McGregor. But I think after McKinley, it's probably McGregor to step up. But to me, like the Niners, if we're running the ball and stuff, you run away from JJ, you get two hands on cue, and then Clemens is a guy who he could blow up a tight end, but then he can also kind of get confused by eye candy, which the Niners do quite a bit of. So I could see them attacking Clemens and getting him out of position. So it's going to be that D end again, opposite of JJ, is a massive factor in this game.
Leonard Taylor, he had a great preseason. The Jets placed Leki Fotu on IR, so Taylor's going to see a bit of an increase in snap count. Still not too much, as he'll probably be that defensive tackle, but probably the last one on the depth chart there. But what do you think his role looks like with Fotu out for the first few games?
Yeah, that's gonna be an interesting question too. And again, we're kind of hitting the area where I think the Jets are going to struggle the most right now, or is that D end opposite? And we know why. Hey, it's supposed to be Reddick right now, and we haven't even hit that. And I don't know if I want to anymore. We've been talking about it for 4 months. It's just crazy. You kind of recapped it, right? You had Mike Lombardi, she's not Schefter. He's not any one of these guys. He puts out a report. They rebuke the report. We don't really know what's going on. And that's really it, right? Like it's so tiring at this point. But yeah, that the end, and then again, the D tackles too, because the Jets struggled last year in terms of stopping the run on the interior of the defensive line. Q is a monster. Q is an absolute savage. We know that. I think he's probably he's a top 3 D tackle in the league. I would say he's probably the second best defensive tackle in terms of run stuffing in the league. I think Lawrence is probably the first, but Lawrence is also 340 pounds, where Q is 305, so it's a little bit different of a role. But past him, last year they struggled there. Al Woods was a good run stuffer. Obviously, he leaves early in the season with an injury. Kinlaw is a guy who he's kind of volatile in that area, where he'll blow up a guy, minus 3 yards, and then he'll also be moved out of his position. Now, hopefully the added weight helps him in terms of kind of settling down in the run game and being able to anchor down versus double teams. But then past that, and the Jets are kind of like that they do that whole substitution thing where it's you take out all the starters for all of the backups. I don't love that they do that. So on the backup unit, you're going to have Solomon Thomas, who's not necessarily a great run stuffer, come in, and Taylor, who is a UDFA. Obviously, he probably shouldn't have been if he was kind of had his head on straight in college, but still, I don't think he's necessarily like your prototypical run stuffer. And even if he is, it's his first game. Like, we're not expecting him to be absolutely dominant in his first game, right? So I do think Leonard Taylor is going to have a role. It's probably 25 to 35% of the reps or so, if I had to guess. But I am concerned with that backup defensive tackle group about stopping that run, especially against gap. You have a guy in Taylor who has been training this whole, and we know what it is, the 4-3, the penetrating front. It's weak against gap scheme and all that stuff. So he's going to have to not only perform in his rookie game, but it's performing against a scheme and a run scheme that is kind of makes it's harder. It's like the perfect kind of answer to what we do. So he's going to have to really take steps, like leaps and bounds to stop the run in this game. So it's going to be really interesting.
Absolutely. If anyone would like to call into the show, it is the pinned comment in the chat. You mentioned, Quinnen Williams being an elite defensive tackle, and I completely agree. He's obviously in the top tier among his position room. Where would you rank him though overall? I know you mentioned you'd put Dexter Lawrence ahead of him in the run stuffing category, because you have Dexter Lawrence, Quinnen Williams, Matabike. I don't know how to say his new first name. He changed his name, but formerly known as Justin Matabike. Where would you stack Quinnen up against those guys?
Yeah, and really, I don't know if it's bias, but he might be the best, really. And if he's not the best, maybe it's second best. I think you can put Chris Jones above him. But the thing with Chris Jones is, and again, I don't watch every single Chiefs game, so it's kind of hard to quantify, right? But I don't think he's as active and as good as Q in the run game. So he's better pass rusher, but I think Q is a much better run stuffer than Chris Jones. And the pass rushing is obviously going to be highlighted on ESPN and NFL Network and all this stuff, and that's what people go to. But run stuffing is really, really important, obviously, in the NFL game as well. So I think he's 1 or 2. Chris Jones is the other one or 2. Dexter Lawrence is probably 3. But anywhere, and again, that's my personal rankings. Maybe I'm a little bit biased. I'm a Jets fan, but I think anything below 3 is just blatantly incorrect.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. I mean, the run stuff, they definitely bring, I agree with you in terms of Chris Jones. They bring different traits to the tables, but both of them benefit each other's teams. For example, the Jets, the defensive line rotation that they're going with this year is primarily, they're really solid against the pass. Then if you look at their prior numbers, some of them have struggled against the run compared to the Chiefs, where they need Chris Jones as more of that pass rusher guy on the inside. So I think they both bring different traits to the table that help both teams for sure. But I completely agree with what you're saying there. And I'm gonna move over to the offensive side of the ball. I wanted to talk to you about the wide receiver room a bit here. Malachi Corley, he didn't have a great summer. Didn't see much out of him in training camp or the preseason. Could you see anything, Joe, where he is inactive to start the season?
I don't think so. I still think they're going to want to have some type of role for him where it's going to be, jet sweeps and all that stuff. And I don't think they're going to display that so much in the preseason, right? I don't think he's some secret weapon, but you don't necessarily want to show them, more of your trick type of plays. Yeah. So I don't think he's going to be inactive. And there's a possibility. I'm not saying there's not a possibility, but I would say it's probably a better chance than not that he's active, and he probably sees maybe 2 to 3, 4 design type of touches. We saw it with Xavier Worthy, obviously, different type of player, but you see these guys getting some yak. It's not something you have to like think about, right? Like you choose your lanes and stuff like that, but you're not just going to suddenly be able to like not run the ball. So, do I think he's have the biggest role in the offense in terms of running actual routes and stuff? No. But I think he still sees his like 2, 3, 4 design touches, early on in the season. Hopefully he develops. There was some incidences in the first preseason game where he actually did run some good routes. And then even in the third preseason game, he ran an out and up on the left sideline, and he was actually open, but you had Andrew Peasley, at quarterback, and Andrew Peasley's not going to throw that ball because Andrew Peasley's kind of like he almost reminded me of like Tim Boyle in this preseason. They're just like not very good.
You remind me of Trevor Siemian.
Yeah, just not good either way. Like just a collection of not good players. It's just so I think Corley probably gets a little bit too much like hate from Jets fans for the preseason because there was some instances where he was open. But with that being said, he still is a relatively raw route runner. So I don't think you're going to use him as like a primary slot guy. You'll probably see Lazard and Gibson over him in terms of like running actual routes. But I do think he's going to have some design touches.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Corley is someone I don't think he's going to get have a huge role immediately in the offense. I think he's someone who's going to take a little developed. I mean, I think there were such high expectations for him when the Jets drafted him. Like, oh, Jets fans were, oh my God, this guy, he's going to be a focal point of the Jets offense for the first year. He's the Yak Kin, blah blah blah. You put all these numbers up at Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky was all I had to hear there. And it's not to say that he's going to be a bad receiver. I just think it's something where it's going to take him maybe a year or two to get used to the system. But where do you see Corley maybe 2 years from now? I know it's a lot to project, but where do you see Corley, finishing up with the Jets? Do you think he has the potential from what you've seen from him on tape to be a solid receiver in this league?
Yeah, like the Jets fan in me wants to say, "Hey, he's the new Debo,"
Yeah.
But like realistically, like is it hard to project? Yeah, I think he's a little bit. I don't think he's as strong as a Debo. He's not as like physically imposing as him, in my opinion, but he's a little bit faster, and I think he can offer more of a vertical element than a Debo Samuel can. But with that being said, in 2 years, like the projection of what he could do, you hope he's like at least a number 2 or number 3, a guy who's a really good yak guy who offers some upside as a route runner, as a vertical guy. So, I think if you draft him in the 3rd round and he's more like a specialist, but as a receiver, he gets you 600-700 yards. Like that's fine for what you drafted him to be. So I think he's gonna be a big yak guy. I think he'll be an okay receiver as a route runner. I don't think he's ever gonna be like something to write home about. He's never gonna be Garrett Wilson or anything like that. But I think if you get a number 2 or a 3 who's a really good yak guy, that's fine. Now, I hope he's Debo and he's getting 1,500 yards a year, but I think that's hard to just project for a 3rd round rookie, right?
I'm going to move over to the offensive line. Veteran guard Wes Schweitzer was ruled out for the Jets opening matchup, and there's a chance that this could turn into something where he's on the IR list to start the season. Do you think this affects the Jets roster at all? As the first few games, is depth on the offensive line is something the Jets really need to hem in on. Is that we've seen how bad that can go. They elevated Jake Hansen to the 53-man roster. What are your overall thoughts on Schweitzer's injury and how it can affect the Jets?
I very quietly knocked on wood for you there, Connor, by the way, because of the injuries. I think 13 different offensive line combinations, right?
Yes,
that's the stat last year.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, a knock on wood. I hope the Jets can keep one combination, maybe 2 for the entire year, and nobody else goes down, or anything like that. But yeah, it's a concern right now because who realistically, again, take off the Jets fan glasses, like who is the backup right now who has proven anything in the NFL level? Crickets, because there's nobody there, like legitimately. Schweitzer is a guy who like he's an okay backup. I do have faith in Newman. I'm not saying that, hey, nobody proved anything in preseason, because Newman had a good preseason. Like he was very, very good. I was very impressed in the leap he made from year 1 to year 2, but we're still talking about preseason, right? Like you got to prove it when it actually matters. So I think there's a high upside for Newman. I'm not going to say, hey, Joe Tippmann goes down. Oh yeah, no problem. We got Newman. It's like, no, I got to see quite a bit to be comfortable with him as a backup. So I'm a little bit concerned about the depth. Now, I don't know who they're going to elevate from the practice squad or if they're even going to, because at the end of the day, it's probably Newman. And then you have Max Mitchell, who played guard as well. So he's probably like more of a backup guard, but again, nothing to write home about. So I would love to see the Jets make a move at interior offensive line. There has to be somebody out there. I know a lot of people talk about McGovern. There's a lot of questions about if he's even healthy yet. So you have a question about, one, the health, and two, if the Jets are going to be running more of the power gap scheme. He's not the best fit in that scheme. So you have a lack of a scheme fit plus an injury. I think it's easier. I think people just, hey, he's out there, sign him. But there's obviously factors you have to consider. So who else is out there? I don't know. But I would like to see the Jets make a move at an interior offensive line, because if you have one guy go down, it could be a problem.
Few more things before we wrap here. Another injury news: Zaire Barnes ruled out for the game, opening matchup against the 49ers. He's looked as someone the Jets might look to develop. I don't view it as a huge loss for the team. Sam McGlavin is most likely going to get put on the Jets 53 for the matchup. How do you think this affects the Jets, if at all?
Yeah, not at all. Special teams. I think it affects Brant Boyer. Obviously those backup linebackers are going to be the backup linebackers, the tight ends, the safeties. Like, they're all important on special teams. So it will affect your special teams. But does it affect the Jets in terms of their base personnel and stuff? No. Even though, with that being said, again, the Niners are a heavier personnel type of team. So I do think you're going to see more of, like, maybe Sherwood than we typically would in some games. So maybe if there was an injury, then you'd see a Barnes, and now it's going to be Surratt or something like that. So I think with an injury, it may affect us, but in terms of, like, the actual game plan, it's not going to really be much. Again, I am interested to see if the Jets do try to counter some of the 49ers heavier personnel sets with some 4-3, bringing Sherwood on. Now, we know last year the Jets ran the most nickel in the league, and that was even versus heavier personnel sets, because you have a guy who's super versatile in Michael Carter, who can do everything. So they're comfortable with, hey, you have 12 personnel, you got 22, whatever it is. We have faith in our slot corner. He's not like miscast against heavier personnel because he's so versatile. But with that being said, getting Sherwood onto the field might be a good idea against some of these, blockers. Obviously Kittle's a great blocker. Juszczyk is a great blocker. So yes. How do the Jets counteract some of those heavier personnel sets?
Joe, final score prediction for Monday.
Yeah, so I said 23. I've been saying 23-20 for like 2 weeks, and that's what I
said 2017.
2017. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the over under is, I think it's 43 or 40.
Wait, no. Oh, I thought you meant the spread. No.
The over under. Yeah, I think it's 43 or 44.
Let's see. Jets versus 49ers over under. Let's see.
I'm pretty sure it's 44. So I think 23-20 is like right on that number. And that's what I'm going to stick with. I'm going to stick with 23-20 Jets. I think realistically, now that's my prediction from a Jets fan. I think if my life was on the line, I probably say 23-29ers. Like, if I really, really had to bet a lot of money on it, I would probably say 23-20. But because I'm a Jets fan and I want to be airing on the side of positivity and all that stuff, I'm gonna say 23-20 Jets. And I think it's really a coin flip game. I don't think it's a thing where I'm just being biased from a Jets fan. Like, the Jets can easily, not easily, but they can win this game. Like, they have the talent to do it. You have a really good or what should be a good rushing attack on the Jets. Now, how long does it take the offensive line to gel? We know that's a part of it. So does the running offense look like it does in week 17, in week 1? Probably not. So how quickly can they get off to a quick start? Now, hopefully, again, more of those practice reps and the more physicality in training camp leads the Jets to being a little bit farther along. So maybe like they're kind of like already in like week 3, kind of in their progression here. And the Jets can run the ball on this team. We know the Niners are based on stats, and go look at Nani's and Rivka's numbers. They put out 1,000 articles a day about this stuff. It's excellent. It's excellent because and it's funny because a lot of people reference it, but they don't credit them. It is what it is. But nonetheless, yeah, the Niners are they were like a middle tier rushing defense last year, and that was with at points Greenlaw and Hufanga, who are both really good players. So now you're missing those guys. The Jets can run the ball on this Niners team if they can ball control, run the ball, get them to choke up a little bit. Second and threes, play action, deep shots to Garrett Wilson, get them to jump once or twice. Deep shots, Alan Lazard, whatever it is. There's definitely a good chance the Jets win this game, and if we do, we have every single right to be insufferable on Twitter for the next couple of weeks because he deserves it more than we do right now.
Everyone smash that like button. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Joe, I really appreciate you joining me here. And the final question I ask to everyone I have on the program here, 4 dinner guests, anyone in the world, dead or alive, who are you taking?
4 dinner guests, dead or alive?
Anyone in the world. Yeah, it could be family member, football, it could be anything.
Yeah, I feel like the right thing is to say family member, but like I already had enough dinners with them. Like they're fine. Like it's okay. So I would probably say Rogers, just because like his mindset. I think it's a pretty fun mindset. I think you have to get one Jet in there. I'm gonna go with Dave Chappelle because he's my favorite
so
comedian
funny,
ever.
yeah.
Hilarious. So I'm gonna go Aaron Rodgers, Dave Chappelle, Shane Gillis, and Joe Rogan, and we're gonna have some really interesting but funny conversations at that dinner, and probably have a beverage or two. So
Yeah, says mine would be Connor Long, Joe Blewett, Robbie Savo, and Aaron Rodgers. Love it, Joe. Really appreciate you joining me here. You got any final thoughts?
Yeah, no. Again, I'm excited that we inked you to a contract early on, so we have you on a nice cheap deal. You're gonna demand a contract and be sitting out like Reddick pretty soon. But yeah, no, keep killing it, man. You're getting all these news articles and stuff, so it's excellent. So I'm happy you invited me. I know my schedule is a little bit inflexible, but obviously we'll be doing this again shortly, I'm sure.
Yeah, glad to have you on. Everyone, make sure you smash that like button, you're subscribed. We have some very fun shows, some big guests that are coming up in the season. I have not announced them yet, but tomorrow, back at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Keith McPherson of WFAN. And then on Wednesday, we have Craig Carton joining the show. And then we will have pregame and postgame coverage on Monday. And then we'll do, recapping the game on Tuesday. But like I said, Joe, really appreciate you joining me here. And everyone, thank you guys for watching. And as always, JTS Jets, Jets, Jets. Appreciate it, man.